Like a grand and miraculous spaceship, our planet has sailed through the universe of time.
Like a grand and miraculous spaceship.
Grand and miraculous.
Grand and miraculous.
I think with the Muppets, there's sort of an innocence to them, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that appeals to the child in everybody. Because I think everybody is a child still.
Well, we all want to build a time machine, don't we? So when you enter Disneyland, you're entering a time machine.
I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a Muppet.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. I want to start off tonight by telling you about a voice. Summer 1989. This was Soundstage 3 at the Walt Disney Studios in Burbank, California. Now, I'm a kid. My dad is a production designer. I've been on sets before. This is what my family does. My grandfather won Academy Awards for production design. My dad designed Spaceship Earth. I know what a soundstage looks like. But this set is different because the characters are alive. Not audio animatronic. They weren't projected. They were alive. Kermit the Frog is talking. Miss Piggy is talking. Fozzie Bear is telling jokes. They're right there, right in front of me. 3 feet tall and completely real. Until they're not. Between takes, I saw the Muppets hung up on sticks, lifeless, limp. Just fabric and foam. I remember feeling uncomfortable seeing them that way. I knew that they were puppets, but I also knew that they were not. And seeing them hanging there, empty, waiting for a hand, it felt wrong. Like seeing a friend asleep and not being sure that they were breathing. And then a very tall man walks over to me, 6'6". He has the kindest face I've ever seen. And when he speaks, I recognize the voice instantly. It's Kermit. Not like Kermit. Not a version of Kermit. Kermit. Bill Prady, the writer of the show we were filming, said it best. When Jim spoke to you, it was like Kermit talking to you because Jim and Kermit had the same voice. Jim Henson asks me if I'm going to be a production designer like my dad. I shook my head. I'm shy. I told him I like computers more. He smiles. Less than a year later, he's dead. 36 years later, here I am, sitting at a computer, telling the story of the last film he ever made. The sets my father built, the voice I'll never forget. This is Grand and Miraculous. I'm your host, John, aka Spaceship Ears, and this is a story of Muppet Vision 3D. Welcome, everybody. Very monumentous episode tonight. Last episode, we covered Captain EO. It was a groundbreaking 4D film. It pushed the boundaries of what a theme park attraction could be. It was made by some of the greatest creative minds alive, and we promised you the one that took those lessons and got everything right. Well, this is it. You're right here. And this is also a very personal episode. My father designed the sets for Jim Henson's last film. I was on set. Jim Henson spoke to me. And later in this episode, well, my dad's here live to tell you what it was like to work alongside Jim Henson in the last months of his life and to finish the job after he was gone. But first, a small detail that connects us to episode 33 when we talked about Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. As you may remember, Michael Eisner wanted to close Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln and put this show inside Lincoln's Theater at Disneyland. Public outcry saved Lincoln. The Muppets almost replaced the Mechanical Man. We'll get to that. As I do, I want to welcome all of you to tonight's episode. I see lots of great friends in chat, and I'll do my best to say hi to folks. I see Dave, I see Kate, Paul's here, Mark, Matt, Brittany, Neil's here. Hey, Neil, hope you're doing great. Debbie is here, Beaker and Honeydew. I'm so happy Beaker and Honeydew is here tonight for obvious reasons. Mattercam Matt, Lamont Gray. Hey, Lamont, hope you're doing great. Kate's in the house, Jason's in the house, so many other friends. Miss Kay's in the house. And David T's in the house. Thank you so much for being here, David. I see Karen Desert Girl. I see lots and lots of great friends. So if I missed you, I'll definitely come back to you. Hey, Danny. I see Danny in the house as well. So as I do, I like to give you a little trivia question. Tonight's trivia. What classic Disney film was shot on the same soundstage where Muppet Vision 3D was filmed? And what piece of the old set did they actually reuse? If you think you know the answer, go ahead and punch it in chat, and we'll see how close you were by the end of the episode. Of course, I want to encourage you, please share your memories of this amazing attraction. It closed last year, so it'd be great to hear from you what you took away from this attraction. Me and Dad, we have some special memories to share tonight, but it's your memories that really make it. So please go ahead and contribute. And as always, please go to the website, www.grandandmiraculous.show. Tonight's code is BEAN, B-E-A-N, short for Bean Bunny. And you can go ahead and punch in your vote for how this attraction measures up, and we can compare it next week. Okay, we have a lot to talk about tonight. I do want to give one shout out to our good friend, Pete McDevitt. He's on the mend. Pete, I know you're listening at some point, whether live or later. Thank you, buddy. I hope you're doing great. We're all thinking about you. All right. So where do we begin? There's so many places we could begin tonight. But let's start with Jim. So the man that spoke to me back on that soundstage had been making puppets since he was a teenager. His first Kermit, in fact, was a halved table tennis ball and fabric from his mother's old coat. He was shy. He was gentle. Carol Spinney, the man inside Big Bird, said he would never say he did not like something. He would just go, And if he liked it, he would say, lovely. He revolutionized puppetry. Before Henson, puppets performed behind a proscenium arch, a little stage, a little curtain. Well, Henson threw all that away. He used the television screen itself as a frame. The puppets didn't perform behind anything. They performed inside the camera. The audience saw the character, not the mechanism. The puppeteer disappeared. He once said of Kermit, he can say things that I hold back. By 1989, he'd been running the business side of everything. The show, the films, the licensing, the whole empire, since its early 20s. And he was tired. He said, I'm going to be able to spend a lot more of my time on the creative side of things. He wanted to sell. He wanted to give the Muppets to someone who could handle the business. And There was only one place that he wanted them to go. He said, Disneyland and Disney World have always been two of my favorite places. I just love them. So, on August 28th, 1989, Disney and Jim Henson announced an agreement in principle. Disney would acquire Henson Associates and the Muppet characters. The price was nearly $150 million. Disney MGM Studios, now Hollywood Studios, had opened that year in what historian called a very, very small park that desperately needed content. Henson had characters that the world loved. The fit was completely obvious. Brian Henson, Jim's son, said it plainly in 2026. He said, "My dad was selling the whole company. His real dream at that time was that the Muppets would be in the theme parks." And the plans were completely enormous. What was now called Grand Avenue in Hollywood Studios was supposed to be Muppet Studios. Not a themed area, but an actual working production facility where Muppet projects could be filmed. Attached to it was something that we covered when we talked about the Great Movie Ride. Yes, it was called the Great Muppet Movie Ride, a dark ride parody of the Great Movie Ride, with the Muppets taking over all the classic film roles. To my knowledge, it was the only plan to have an attraction and a parody of the attraction running at the same time. And that wasn't even the most audacious plan. Jack Lindquist, the president of Disneyland, devised something called Muppetland. The concept? After Disneyland's 35th anniversary celebration in 1990, Mickey Mouse and the Disney characters would go on vacation. Kermit the Frog and the Muppets would take over the entire park for a whole year. The Disneyland entrance marquee would be covered and the park renamed Muppetland. The Mickey-shaped flower bed, it would become a Kermit head. Miss Piggy would take over as Cleopatra in It's a Small World. Animal would appear in Pirates of the Caribbean. In fact, they were going to paint the 147-foot Matterhorn green, which is appropriate for today. And here's where it connects back to where we talked about Mr. Lincoln. Well, Michael Eisner planned to close Great Moments in Mr. Lincoln and retool the Main Street Opera House for Muppet Vision 3D on the West Coast. Lincoln's attendance had dropped to reportedly 1 in 100 guests. On August 19th, 1990, the news broke. The Deseret News ran a headline. Will Disney's Lincoln be overthrown by a coup of mirthful Muppets? Well, the public backlash saved Lincoln. And we told you back in that episode that Lincoln almost died. Well, now you know who almost replaced him. But first, before Muppetland, before the Great Muppet Movie Ride, before Lincoln's Theater could be converted, they had to make the show. And they were already filming just months after the announcement. Cameras were rolling. Jim Henson directed. He performed Kermit the Frog, Waldorf, and the Swedish Chef. He was 53 years old. Well, he had less than a year to live. And the puppet, the show, the film, the thing he was building would show up without him. The puppet showed up without the puppeteer. I see some good friends popping in chat. I see Mark and Monorail Molly, Jen. Hope you're doing great. Kate E is in the house. Hello, good friends. Thank you for being here. Let's move on to the script. The man who wrote Muppet Vision 3D was a college dropout and a computer programmer. His name was Bill Prady. He got hired at Henson Associates in 1982. Now, not as a writer, but as a production assistant. He ended up in the licensing department working on software projects. But he could write. And one day he wrote a humorous press quote for Rolf the dog postal stamp. Rolf, riffing on dogs and mailmen, ending with, "But I digress." Jim Henson visited Prady's office, asked if he'd written it, and he said yes. Henson said, "Yeah, I think we're going to do it. It's pretty good." No notes, no changes requested. That was Henson. Or lovely. Nothing in between. Well, Prady began writing for Henson. Fraggle Rock, the animated series, the Jim Henson Hour, and then he got the assignment that would define his career. Not the Big Bang Theory, which he'd co-create 18 years later. This. He got sole writing credit on Muppet Vision 3D. Now, the original concept centered on Bean Bunny as a lead character with cameo appearances from other Muppets. Well, the Imagineers push back. Successful theme park attractions need familiar characters. They need the Muppet Show format, a theater, a proscenium, backstage chaos, and a show that, of course, goes horribly wrong. And they need to break the fourth wall. Brady and Henson listened. The script evolved. There was one writer, one director, and there was a clear script before cameras rolled. Now, Captain EO proved that a theme park film could be epic. Muppet Vision proved that it could also be simple. Bill Brady and Jim Henson, and that was it. Soundstage 3, the same soundstage where 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was filmed in 1954. It still had the water tank, 3,600 square feet of it. This was Captain Nemo's tank. They used it for Miss Piggy's water skiing sequence. And that was the first thing that they filmed. And then they struck the set and moved to the other side of the stage for the Muppet Lab sequence, the hallway, Dr. Bunsen Honeydew's laboratory. Exterior shots used old sets from Something Wicked This Way Comes. The patriotic finale, of course, was filmed last. And here's who was in that room. Jim Henson, Kermit, Waldorf, the Swedish Chef, Frank Oz, Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Sam Eagle. And here's a detail that mattered to Henson. In television, Oz could only perform one character at a time. In film, for the first time, Sam Eagle, Fozzie, and Miss Piggy could share screen time simultaneously. Henson loved this about making movies. Richard Hunt did Scooter, Statler, Beaker, Sweetums. Well, he would die 2 years later at the young age of 40. Dave Gultz did Gonzo and Dr. Bunsen Honeydew. Steve Whitmire, Waldo C. Graphic, Bean Bunny, Rizzo the Rat. After Henson's death, Whitmire would inherit Kermit the Frog and perform him for 27 years. And then there was Sweetums. Brian Henson, Jim's son, was inside that 7-foot costume. I watched him on set, take after take after take, trying to bounce a ball off a paddle straight at a 3D camera. It had to be precise. It had to hit the lens line perfectly, or the 3D effect wouldn't work at all. And between takes, they'd have to open up the costume and air him out. He was drenched. He'd catch his breath, close it back up, and do it again. And that's what the magic looked like from the soundstage floor. A man inside a puppet, soaking wet, bouncing a ball at a camera over and over until it was right. Well, this was the last time that the core group of Muppeteers were all together. 2 of the 5 core performers in that room, Henson and Hunt, would be dead within 2 years. Every joke they told, every character they performed, every take they nailed would outlive them. The puppets showed up without the puppeteers. And my father, John DeCure Jr., was a production designer. Now, you know of him. He's previously designed Spaceship Earth at Epcot. You know it as the 180-foot geodesic sphere containing a 15,000-year history of human communication. Now, he was building worlds for 3-foot Muppets. Both required creating something from nothing at all, and both required making an audience believe. When the protagonists are 3-foot sock puppets on a mission, it's more important than ever that the narrative world be credible, believable, high fidelity. Immersion, take a drink, that's what we talk about on the show. Immersion only happens when the audience trusts the veracity of what they're seeing. They will only enter the world if they believe in it completely. And that means attention to detail. Here's one story that captures a little bit about how he worked. Well, at one point, the camera needed to glide through a wall into Muppet Labs. You probably remember the scene. This was Bunsen and Beaker's laboratory. Well, in order for the camera to fit, a wall had to be pulled out. That was never intended to be a fourth wall, leaving a terribly unattractive broken-edged crack in the wall. Well, when it slid back together, it was unshootable. The company was standing around while we waited for paint and plaster guys to fix it up. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Company time is money, of course. What was my dad's solution? Well, you can see up here in the corner. Yes, he covered up the seam with a pipe. A pipe running along a wall looks like it belongs there. Nobody questions a pipe. The audience never notices because they're looking at a pipe they thought was always part of the set. So the guy who designed Spaceship Earth was scurrying around, uncovering and putting a pipe in place. Why? Attention to detail. The world had to be believable, and the crew couldn't wait for the paint and plaster to get there. The narrative world had to be credible for immersion to kick in. No attention to detail means no credibility and no immersion. My grandfather, John DeCure Sr., once said, "Production design is the total control of the visual aspects of the cinematic presentation. Even the seams are designed." Now, Mark Eads, one of the Imagineers on the project, remembered Henson this way. Jim was very involved in the project. He was genuinely interested in doing theme park attractions. I think Jim liked that it would be something people would see for a long time in an environment like a Disney theme park. He was always a pleasant, fun fellow to be around. And here's a really good story from the shoot. During the patriotic finale, a cannon blast dislodged a character's arm. Steve Whitmire, performing the character, dramatically overacted the puppet's death. Full melodrama. Henson laughed. He genuinely laughed hard. He commended the performance. And then he told Whitmire if he ever lost his arm again, not to die like that ever again. And I remember him being excited about a new technology that they were building for the finale, a remote-controlled puppet mouth for Kermit. Instead of a hand inside the puppet, Henson could control the mechanism remotely, and Kermit's mouth would animate accordingly. He was 53 years old, less than a year from the end of his life, and he was still finding new ways to make a puppet talk. Still innovating, still pushing the art forward. That's Henson. He was generous, funny, precise, and alive. Jim Henson used to like to write in storyboards. Bill Prady had pages and pages of Kermit and Piggy and Gonzo, drawn by Jim Henson's own hand, in his basement office at Muppet Productions. Well, years later, he threw them away while cleaning. He said, "It broke my heart." I see some other good friends come in the chat. Let me just say hi to some folks. Bitritz is in the chat. Hello, Bitritz. Thank you for being here. All aboard with Blake. Hey, Blake. Hope you're doing great. I think that's everybody. If I missed you, my apologies. There's lots of stuff to talk about here. So, when it comes to the show itself, the first time I sat in that theater, of course, I recognized the sets. My dad built them. I recognized the voices. I'd heard them on the soundstage. But something was very different. On set, the Muppets hung on sticks between takes. Here, they never stopped. The lights went down and they were alive. And they stayed alive. For 14 minutes and 36 seconds, there was no gap between the puppet and the character. No seam, no stick. Now, I'm not going to walk you through the show scene by scene. I'm sure you've all seen it and you all remember it. Of course, if you haven't, well, the VR recording is coming. But what I want to tell you is what it felt like to be in that room. Bubbles fell from the ceiling, not because bubbles are fun, but because Bean Bunny was trying to add 3D effects to Miss Piggy's rendition of Dream a Little Dream of Me. Water hit your face, not because water is surprising, but because Sweetums was putting out a fire. The cannon blast rocked the theater, not because cannons are loud, but because penguins were angry. Every single physical effect had a reason behind it. The technology served the story. The story was never an excuse for the technology. Well, Captain EO used the effects to dazzle you. Muppet Vision used its effects to make you laugh. Both worked, but only one made the technology invisible. And then something happened that I've never experienced in any other theater. A 7-foot Muppet walked into the audience. Sweetums, a live performer hidden inside the costume. He came out from behind the screen and walked down the aisle looking for Bean Bunny. He talked to the audience. He interacted with the show. The screen was no longer a boundary. The theater was a show itself. No other attraction in memory had done that. Not before, not since. It was a live Muppet in the room, part of the story. And the show didn't just break the fourth wall. It broke all of them. Statler and Waldorf heckled from an audio animatronic balcony to the right of the screen. They were physically seated in the theater like the audience, yet constantly interacting with what was happening on screen. They were spectators and participants at the same time, part of the audience, part of the story. The Swedish chef operated the projector from a booth above and behind the audience. And when the chef's cannon misfired, it blew up the theater, tearing a hole in the screen, revealing bricks and sheetrock through the auditorium, and showing what was on the other side of that screen, which were guests at a Disney park. And then there was Bean Bunny. He disappeared on screen, lost, running away, and he reappeared in the balcony, a physical puppet, while a projected Kermit continued the dialogue with him from the screen. Film and physical space collapsed into each other, image talking to object. The boundary between what was real and what was projected simply stopped existing. Well, the show ended with Kermit arriving on a fire engine through the hole to apologize for the chaos. And then Waldo C. Graphic, a fully CGI character, which was radical from 1990, shapeshifted into Mickey Mouse, voiced by Wayne Allwine, who was Disney's official Mickey for 32 years. There was Mickey Mouse hiding inside a Muppet show. And then, of course, Bean Bunny's last line. What a cute ending. Well, Captain EO cost $23.7 million and pioneered what 4D could be. Muppet Vision was budgeted at only $8 million, and it came in at $7 million. They used a leftover $1 million to add enhancements. Different ambitions, different scales, but the same goal. Put an audience inside a story. Now, my father has a word for what Muppet Vision 3D did. He calls it transvergence. The moment when narrative escapes the boundaries of its medium and enters the audience's physical space. Now, this concept is rooted in narrative history. From the earliest cave drawings to today, narrative art has been striving to break free of the limits of its communication technology and escape. But escape where and why? This coming to life experience seems to be solely for the purpose of inviting the audience to immerse themselves in the experience and become part of the story. Well, that term, immersive experience, is very popular today. And as AI and as communication technologies advance, this narrative becomes more and more detailed and virtual approaches reality. Muppet Vision explored this on a few levels, beginning, of course, with the 3D technology itself, where objects and events seem to come off the screen and into the audience. And of course, the physical puppets, when scenes come off the screen and into the room. Statler and Waldorf are constantly interacting both with the audience. In fact, they're part of the audience and with events on the screen. Bean Bunny gets lost, like we talked about. Long story short, the theater was the story. My father places it in a tradition that goes back all the way to Buster Keaton walking in and out of the movie screen in Sherlock Jr. and Woody Allen's The Purple Rose of Cairo, where characters step out of the film into the real world. It raises a question of whether these films can be remade with the new and advanced technologies that AI can provide. Muppet Vision belongs to that same lineage, but translated into a theme park where architecture, performance, film, and audience, or the audience experience all converge together. Disney and Henson combined together to exploit both this film and animation technology to explore this emergence of narrative and audience immersion. We can expect to see more of this as AI and communication provides us with new ways of exploring this term that we call transvergence. And at the center of it all, there was a puppet, alive in the room, the performer hidden inside the costume. He was invisible. The audience sees a character, but not the puppeteer. As I say, the puppet showed up without the puppeteer. And that's the art form Jim Henson invented. You hide your hand, you disappear. The character lives. The audience never sees you. But that's puppetry. And Jim Henson was by far the greatest puppeteer who ever lived. I met him that summer. He spoke to me. He asked me about my future. He was the tallest person in any room he walked into, 6'6", and the gentlest. Less than a year later, May 4th, 1990, Jim Henson makes his final television appearance. He performs Kermit the Frog on the Arsenio Hall show. Well, he's tired. He has a sore throat. He tells his publicist, it's nothing. May 15th, around 2 a.m, he has trouble breathing, coughing up blood. He tells his wife he thinks he might be dying. He doesn't want to go to the hospital. He doesn't want to be a bother. 2 hours later, he agrees to go. By taxi, not even an ambulance. May 16th, 1990, 1:21 a.m., Jim Henson dies. Toxic shock syndrome. He was 53 years old. Doctors say that he might have been saved if he had come in just hours earlier. 6'6", the tallest person in any room, the man who filled every space he walked into. He was gone because he didn't want to take up space, because he didn't want to be a bother. Frank Oz, of course, his partner for 27 years, the other hand in every scene, said in 2021, the Disney deal is probably what killed Jim. It made him sick. This was a deal that was supposed to free him. Well, the Disney acquisition collapsed. The Henson family had second thoughts. The negotiations fell apart. The full Muppet Studios were scrapped. The great Muppet movie ride would never be built. Muppetland would never happen. And the Matterhorn would stay white. But Brian Henson, Jim's son, convinced his family not to abandon his father's last project. My dad's real dream was that the Muppets would be in the theme parks. Frank Oz directed reshoots. Bill Prady reworked the middle section. He said it kind of fell flat after Henson's death. Pacific Data Images completed Waldo's CGI. And they finished the job. The people who loved him finished what he started. May 16th, 1991. 1 year to the day after Jim Henson died. Muppet Vision 3D opens at Disney MGM Studios. The title on the building reads, Jim Henson's Muppet Vision 3D. His name is on the building. His voice is on the screen. And for 34 years, 580 people at a time would sit down in a darkened theater and hear Kermit the Frog welcome them to hit the show. 2004, Disney acquires the Muppets for $75 million. Lisa Henson says, my father pursued discussions with Disney based on his strong belief that Disney would be the perfect home for the Muppets. They bought the characters and they took the creator's name off the building. Jim Henson's Muppet Vision 3D became just Muppet Vision 3D. 2014, Muppet Vision closes at Disney California Adventure. Disney calls it temporary. Well, it's permanent. The theater becomes a Frozen sing-along. 2017, the original Kermit sign is removed from the Hollywood Studios building, replaced with a generic Grand Arts Theater marquee. The Kermit hot air balloon is removed from the roof. The Muppet fountain, Gonzo, and Miss Piggy, the whole gang, is reduced to just Piggy and some rats. And the plumbing fails. No water. They use it as a planter. The fire truck disappears. Muppet's courtyard is renamed Grand Avenue. The Kermit and Miss Piggy mural on the building's exterior, this was a Gone with the Wind parody that had been there for years, is painted over. Supposedly it was done to match the area's color scheme. Well, each change removed a layer of identity. The Muppets did not close all at once, contrary to popular belief. They were slowly painted over. November 22nd, 2024. Disney announces the closure. Monsters, Inc. is coming. They promised to preserve the film. They announced Rock and Roller Coaster will be rethemed to the Muppets. This was a consolation. Ken Pilcher, a theme parks historian, said, the passion of the fan base caught them completely off guard. June 7th, 2025, last year, the final published performance. Well, this lady, Heather Henson, Jim Henson's daughter, makes a rare public appearance to join fans at the closing. Her father made this film. He never saw it open, and now she's watching it close. June 10th, cast member farewell screenings filmed for posterity. February 2026, Brian Henson reveals that the show was recorded with 3D cameras, so the recording will be made available on the Apple Vision Pro and other VR headsets. Now, the show is gone. The theater is coming down, but Brian Henson recorded it. The same Brian Henson who was inside the Sweetums costume on Soundstage 3, he was drenched in sweat, bouncing a ball to camera take after take after take. The son who was inside the puppet is now making sure that the puppet shows up again. Now, this puppet will show up on a headset in someone's living room years from now, without the theater, without the audio animatronics, without Sweetums in the room. The puppet will show up without the puppeteer once again. August 13th, 2024. Before the closure was even confirmed, just rumors, Bill Prady, who went on to co-create The Big Bang Theory, one of the most successful sitcoms in television history, posted this. Of all the things I've written, I might be the most proud of Muppet Vision 3D. If this is truly the end of its run, I'm glad for its time on Earth and the joy of making it. It was the last thing Jim Henson directed. This is the most successful sitcom writer of his generation, and he's most proud of a 14-minute puppet show. Now, if you've been with us since episode 10, way back when we talked about Spaceship Earth, you know my dad. He designed Spaceship Earth. He designed the sets for the film we're talking about today, Jim Henson's last film. He was in that room on Soundstage 3 in the summer of 1989. I was too. I was a kid, and he was building that world. I want to welcome him on the show. Dad, welcome to Grand and Miraculous. Thanks for being here.
Good evening. Welcome to Muppet Lab.
That's right. Love your background. In case you might remember this little sketch, this may bring back some memories of the original sketch. So I know I only have you for a little bit of time, but I'm so grateful that you were able to come on with us and give us some personal anecdotes and some personal stories about making this great attraction. And we're so grateful that you're here.
I did hurt my hand running across the stage with that pipe, just to follow.
Well, the pipe was epic.
Attention to detail,
That's right. That's right. You got to focus on the details. Let's start way back. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up on this project. What was the pitch? Did they come and tell you, hey, we need you to build a world for a puppet show? What was it like?
Well, I had been working for Imagineering for almost 20 years, but not consistently, in and out on sabbatical for various projects. And I originally went off to be design director for Six Flags, and then left again after Spaceship Earth to primarily set up my own company. And Marty Sklar and John Hench came over, took a look at our little office and said, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I'm going to wait for you to give me my next job. They did a string. They were very kind. There's our little office. Mm-hmm. They did a string of very nice contracts they gave to us. We did Ellen's Energy, and we did, of course, the 3D Muppet movie, and we did Alien Encounters. We did Mickey's Audition. Films for designing the sets, films for theme park attractions. And it gave our company a little start there, and it was very, very excellent. And I think saved Disney payroll a lot of money for hiring me and firing me and hiring me and firing me between projects. But then it also allowed me to stay in primarily in the feature film live action business. Your grandfather, my father, was actually offered a background job at Disney in animation, and he just had to stay in live action film. And I think a little bit of that was in the DNA, so I had to follow along in that path.
Definitely.
Well, that's how I came across Muppet 3D, thanks to Marty and John.
Yep. No small names, Marty Sklar and John Hench. So, by the way, I see a good friend in the chat, Pete McDevitt. Hope you're doing great, friend. Thanks for being here. So grateful that you're here live. Let's talk a little bit about Henson as a director. What was it like working with Jim?
Well, you can't say enough nice things. Being in live action film, production designers go on interviews quite often. Most people go on a job interview and they stay with a job for years sometimes, if not more. But film designers really have to continually be interviewed. And these interviews sometimes turn out to be like trials. You're kind of on trial. Not with Jim. He was so gracious. And I guess he'd done his homework and knew he was going to hire me anyway before the interview, because he had nothing but great things to say. There were no hums in that meeting. Just a lot of positive. And surprisingly, usually you don't go on location scouting until weeks into the film. But on this day, he said, one thing I really would like you to do is, because you're going to have to compare the worlds you've been designing for human beings with this world that you're going to be designing for my Muppets. So I want you to go and live with Kermit and Piggy, for a week, and go back to New York, go into my lab, poke around, find out everything you can find out, examine what we do and how we do it. And I think you'll be in a much better position to design these worlds once you get familiar with them and how they operate. Of course, the mechanics, but the scale being the most important thing. That we had to build these diminished worlds, not diminished in quality or emotion, but diminished physically in scale. So all I remember about Jim was he was so encouraging, and I think that encouragement, I think you'll find from other people who work with him, really brought out the best work. You really wanted to succeed and do well for him.
Yeah.
Because he constantly encouraged that kind of participation.
Yeah. What was his creative process like? What was he interested in?
Well, I only knew him on this one project, but so our total focus was on what you have quite adequately and excellently described previously, was on immersion, which was on this transvergence of moving off the screen and into the audience. And he was constantly reminding me that that's what we wanted to accomplish with this. That's why he was extremely interested in the 3D, that illusion of coming off the screen. And then all the 4D in-theater effects, from bubbles to rain to wind and then to, as you said, putting his animated characters in the theater and playing between them and the screen. You can see this constant kind of transvergence between reality and screen life and breaking down the proscenium.
Yeah. In particular, how did Muppet Vision explore and present that idea of transvergence in particular?
Well, I think you've gone over it in great detail. I mean, the effects of
just some pictures.
Well, there's the effects of coming off the screen. The 3D process itself, were extremely important. They were that was the primary. We change immersion to immersion with an E when the screen image comes off the screen and at you. And there's probably no greater contemporary example of immersion than the 3D process. And then bringing the physical characters, the animated physical characters, into the theater with the audience. In those two films you cited, in Sherlock Jr. and in Purple Rose, Woody Allen's film, the audience goes into the screen. Now, we didn't quite pull that one off for obvious reasons, but that's the idea. That's the concept, is that moving back and forth between those worlds.
Yeah. Why we talk about immersion, transvergence all the time on our nighttime chats. Why, if you were to explain this to a layman, why is the idea of transvergence even important in the first place?
Well, I'll go back on some old terminology that we're all familiar with, which is primarily suspension of disbelief. Storytellers from the cave wall to date have been anxious and struggling to create moments in their storytelling where the audience suspends logic and believes the fantasy, believes the narrative. And this is an interesting image with this Egyptian frieze, beginning to be a frieze. The Egyptians painted for years on cave walls. Not cave walls, excuse me, they're stone ones. And I have a feeling after a few hundred years they washed off. So they probably then decided they better start carving them into the stone. But you can almost see this image trying to escape, trying to get away from the wall, trying to break free. And we use examples of this, and then all the way into strange, interesting examples like the stained glass windows in Chartres, where the image is just transmitted by light through that glass down to the congregation. And the idea of the story world emerging, and that can only really, to a point where the fidelity level, which you talked about, is so good that the audience begins to suspend their disbelief and go with the story and go with the illusion that they are, in fact, able to enter the experience. And I think Roddenberry in Star Trek pushed it even further with the holodeck, where
Mhm.
they were actually walking into the experience. Now, we haven't been able physically to do that yet. I think VR is getting us a little closer to that, but that's the goal.
Mhm.
The goal is, and fidelity with each. We go back to those Egyptians, and then
Mhm.
the Gothic period and the Renaissance. Each time it was a technology that allowed the image to come to life, break free. In other words, only certain stone tools allowed that carving to happen. And the
Right.
metallurgy of that technology. And same with stained glass windows, and moving right on up to the motion picture. Each
Mhm.
time the technology advances, and I love this little thing of Alice through the looking glass, of walking through into the audience. The technology is our best friend in that regard, and that's why today with AI, I think we're very excited about what it's going to allow us to do to push the emergence, the transvergence to the next level.
Right.
And
And to some of our listeners, they may think, "Oh my gosh, all this theory, we're talking about Egyptians and so forth. I thought this was about Muppets, right?" But it all ties together. It's a continuous line all the way back
Jim
from
understood
Disney
this process.
stories.
Jim understood this process,
Yeah.
and his world, of course, were the Muppets, and so he was applying that theory
Yeah.
to his Muppet world.
Let's talk about a concrete example. So, as you and I remember, when I was very little, I was hanging out with you on the set, and we ended up wandering around North Hollywood to every single nursery we could find, and we ended up buying every single bonsai tree we could get our hands on. Of course, it was for Miss Piggy's scene to really sell the forced perspective in the background. Um, how did you use tricks like that? I mean, what was in your mind when it was time to make sets really feel perfect for these characters?
Well, it's moving from theory to very practical situations, and forced perspective has been used by film designers for ages, and primarily because you go back to technology again, the sound technology force of the day forced filmmaking into these concrete boxes to protect for sound, and we still call them sound stages today, even though it's less relevant. And those concrete walls were always in the way. They were always in the wrong place. So when the designer is trying to, in fact, there's a interesting story about on The King and I, how the cameraman actually, blew a hole through the stage wall. First time ever in Hollywood history on one of my father's sets. Blew a hole in the wall so he could move his camera back and get a little more room.
Get a little bit more into the frame. Yeah.
Well, that's what forced perspective is all about, in terms of trying to create the illusion that in a very short space you can create tremendous amount of depth. And that requires, well, there were two scale issues here. One was, of course, everything had to be scaled down 65% because we were dealing with 3-foot people instead of 6-foot people. And the second thing was we were trying to collapse a world that was supposed to go back, for miles into a few feet. And for us to do that, those trees had to be miniaturized. Now, building that little gazebo was easy. We could just build it small. But it's kind of hard to grow a small tree unless you know how to do that. And the Japanese, of course, figured that out for us. And so we literally ran around town in that old pickup truck and scavenging up, bonsai trees of various heights.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would say things like, "Oh, let's see, that's about 1.5 miles away, that tree," as we're picking it up and carrying it to the truck.
Right.
But anyway, forced perspective is just a good design technique that most designers deal with and work with on often.
Yeah. It's almost like Walt's multiplane camera coming back to life, applying the same tech.
Same thing with layering, and every time you go back in a layer, things need to diminish through the laws of perspective and Brunelleschi and all that good stuff.
It also probably explains why I don't have a green thumb. I got so tired of going to nurseries that day, so I was traumatized. When you heard the sad news that Jim Henson had died, do you remember where you were? What did you think about the show at the time?
I was walking across the park, and he was in a hole, working, and he was in a hole because Kermit was up there up in the air, with the park in the background, and I walked over, and he said, "Hi, John, come on down," and I said, "No, thanks, I'm late for a meeting." "Well, let's get together," and I said, "Sure, absolutely, love to," and I ran off, and 2 to 3 days later, he was gone. It was really sad, and that was my last contact with him. And to this day, I think about that moment.
Right. A lot of people did. And we got to talk about the crate. Now, after he died, you received something at your office. Can you tell us a story about the crate?
The infamous crate, yes.
Yes.
Well, it was the end of this interview is very sad. First we lost Jim, and this story dealt with losing my father, your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And I was out of town and just coming back, and got the phone call that Dad was on his last legs, and ran to the office to get some paperwork, and then off to visit him. And the opening the door to my office, there was this huge box, which I banged into, and I'm very frustrated and pushed it to one side and asked my assistant to get over there and, "What is that thing? Open that thing up." And so I went upstairs and got my paperwork and came back down. When I came back down, there was this wonderful toy soldier, that's beautiful. You can see him in the background here. Mm-hmm. That is a picture of the same toy soldier.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. And I couldn't help but think there was some connection between this little toy soldier arriving, now that Jim Henson had just passed away, on the very day that my father passed away. And I'd like to believe that they were both up there having an awful good time, and decided to send me this toy soldier just to befuddle me up a bit. And we put him in a glass case. He's on display now at the University of Asbury. And to me, he connects Jim Henson and my father, and you and I, in a very wonderful way. So.
Yep. Right now, it's on display. I should point out that the John D. Cure Production Design Center at Asbury University, so it's in good hands there. And yeah, that story always gets me because it's a
well, that's a Henson connection that I think will keep us close with Jim for a very long time.
For sure. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show for a few minutes and sharing some of these stories. I so enjoy
your guests and their comments, and
excellent.
And we like to see the notion of Disney creative Imagineering pushed forward. Always.
Yes.
Everywhere.
And we got to keep carrying that torch of immersion, transvergence. All these.
Well, I'm just hoping that a few young designers are excited about the theory as I am, and then begin to apply it in very practical ways as they begin to get hands on this new AI technology and apply it.
Right, exactly.
To film production and theme park attraction production, etc.
And I should point out, in case people don't know, that you're a professor. You're teaching a class right now in Asbury Online about those very concepts.
Still trying to every once in a while get a young person through that class that I think has great potential. So paying it forward. I had so many good teachers. Sometimes I like to do a show just on my teachers.
That would be great.
I mean, Herbie Ryman and John Hinch and Marty and my father, and I mean the list goes on and on. And some people no one's seldom heard of.
Oh, sure.
That were really great artists and great teachers.
Well, that's one thing we like to do here, is to highlight, the people behind the scenes, the actual Imagineers, the artists that people may not know about, but, we're critical. We're completely critical to the creation of these attractions. So.
Well, just closing on that note.
Yep.
The one area that you mentioned occasionally, but the one area that I really enjoy digging into is the relationship between Imagineering and the film production design world. The live action versus the theme park development.
Yes.
We know that most of the early Imagineers were film designers first, and then they morphed into Imagineering. And those two skill sets, those two worlds, live action and theme park attractions, have a very interesting intersection. And that would be fun to talk about those people and what they brought to the table from both sides.
Right.
From both sides.
And Walt was very intentional. He didn't go to carnival experts. He went to the film industry because that's what he wanted to capture.
Well, he grew up watching. Well, he not grew up, but he watching those sets come to life on his stages, and now he simply moved that capability into the real world. That's the one. When we talk about immersion, when we talk about transvergence, the Disney creation of their parks and their attractions is the most leading, cutting-edge example of putting people into the experience, of breaking down that wall, of moving the story off that screen and into a world that people can walk through.
Right.
So he broke the rule book.
Yep.
And set a record there, historical record. I think it's going to go down in history as a major turning point in entertainment narrative design.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Dad, for being here. We wouldn't be able to talk about these attractions if it weren't for the things that you did and other people did as well. So thank you.
Many more people did a great deal more than I, but I did have a little touchstone there and a few experiences.
Yeah, you touched a few of them. We'll have some more attractions. We'll talk about Alien Encounter at some point. We'll talk about the other ones as well. So we'll have you back. Thank you, Dad. Appreciate it.
Look forward to it.
So let's wrap this up. I hope you enjoyed that. Throughout tonight, I've been saying the puppet showed up without the puppeteer. And that's not a metaphor. That's actually what happened. A crate arrived at my father's office. Inside it was this guy, a soldier puppet from the finale. He was sent before Jim Henson died, and it arrived after. Jim Henson spent his whole life making puppets that showed up without the puppeteer. And that's what puppetry is. You hide your hand, you disappear, the character lives, and the audience never sees you. And when you're really gone, when you're not hiding anymore, when you're just gone, the puppet still shows up in a theater, in a crate, in a headset, with a note in a crate with a puppet. The puppet showed up once again without the puppeteer. Now, Muppet Vision 3D ran for 34 years. It was the same show on June 7th, 2025, that it was on May 16th, 1991. The joke still landed. The gag still worked. Now I come to the point in the show where I rate the attraction, and I must put something on the table. I am impossibly biased when it comes to this attraction. So please don't expect any kind of neutrality or any amount of unbiased commentary here, because this show means not only so much to all of you, but also to me personally. So keep that in mind as we embark upon rating it. As always, we start with immersion. 10 out of 10. The 4D effects were integrated into the narrative. Every bubble, splash, and cannon blast completely served the story. But it's not just the effects. The theater itself was part of the film. Statler and Waldorf heckled from their audio animatronic balcony simultaneously. Audience camp members and cast members. Swedish Chef fired from the projection booth. Bean Bunny disappeared on screen and reappeared as a physical puppet. And Sweetums, a 7-foot Muppet, walked into the audience to search for Bean Bunny. This was a live performer, fully in character, in the room with you. No other attraction had ever done that. And this theater was designed to look like the one from the Muppet Show. You weren't watching a film, you were inside a Muppet Show. Characters above you, beside you, behind you, and then the aisle next to you. Now, as you just heard, my father calls this transvergence, narrative escaping its medium and entering the audience's physical space. Most attractions aim for mere immersion, pulling you into the story, but Muppet Vision did something rarer. The story came out at you. The 3D, of course, aged, but transvergence isn't about resolution. It's about the boundary between screen and room disappearing. And in that theater, that screen disappeared completely. And that's why it's a 10 out of 10. Storytelling, 10 out of 10. Now, Captain EO got a 5 for storytelling. It was ambitious but fragmented. Why am I giving Muppet Vision a 10 in comparison? There was one writer, one clear structure. Kermit gives a tour. Things go wrong. The chaos escalates. The theater blows up. Kermit apologizes. Every single 4D effect serves a narrative. Now, the chaos isn't layered on top of the story. The chaos is the story. Bean Bunny has a genuine emotional arc. The little character, he keeps trying to help and keeps making things worse. Who runs away, who's found by Sweetums, who agrees to come back if he can help. Rejection, failure, rescue, redemption. All of this in 14 minutes. Most theme park films don't even attempt character development. This one delivers a complete emotional journey in less time than a sitcom episode. But what gives us a perfect score, what separates it from merely great, is that the show is not just well structured. It's a story about storytelling. The Muppets are putting on a show. When the show breaks down, the fourth wall breaks down with it. The audience becomes part of the narrative. That's not just good structure, that's structural genius. And of course, the structure is a love letter to the Muppet Show, one of the most successful storytelling formats in television history. This was a show within a show. The backstage chaos, the fourth wall is a punchline. Henson and Piggy didn't invent a new format. They took the format that worked for 120 episodes and 5 seasons and perfected it for a theater. After Jim Henson's death, Bill Prady identified a middle section that kind of fell flat and reworked it. That's craft. That's not a flaw. They found the weakness, they fixed it, and the fixed version ran for 34 years without a single rewrite. No pop culture refreshes, no dialogue swaps, no reskins. The script that opened on May 16th, 1991 was the exact same script that closed on June 7th, 2025. Almost nothing in themed entertainment can claim that kind of durability. And of course, delight. Is there any guess? Obviously, a 10 out of 10. And this is where the perfect score lives. It's a salute to all nations, but mostly America. Families quoted that line for 34 years. Kids reached out to grab the 3D effects. Adults laughed at jokes that they'd heard a dozen times. Well, this show made people happy every single time. Sweetums walking into the audience. Bean Bunnies, what a cute ending. The Swedish chef firing a cannon at the screen. Miss Piggy getting pulled into a pond. Every moment was designed to delight, and every moment delivered. Bill Prady, who went on to co-create The Big Bang Theory, said, "Of all the things I've written, I might be most proud of Muppet Vision 3D." The show delighted its own creator more than the most successful sitcom in television history. So, of course, taking the average and the geometric mean, it's our second attraction that earns a 10 out of 10, at least from my very biased perspective. Now, only the Haunted Mansion has scored a 10 on this show. And for a 14-minute puppet show that came in $1 million under budget, that's the company it deserves to keep. Jim Henson didn't need $23.7 million. He needed Bill Prady, Frank Oz. He needed a pipe to hide a seam, and every bonsai tree in North Hollywood. I see a comment in chat. I want to get back to, let's see if I saw it. Did your dad say it arrived in the office the same day my grandfather passed? Very close. Yes. Back to our trivia question. What was in the soundstage that Muppet Vision was filmed? It was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The 1954 Kirk Douglas classic was, of course, filmed on Soundstage 3. And when Jim Henson's crew arrived, the water tank was still there. 3,600 square feet of it. This was Captain Nemo's tank. They used it for Miss Piggy's water skiing sequence. Captain Nemo's tank became Miss Piggy's pond. That's production design. Now, I want to encourage you, please do go to the website. Yours is the only unbiased voice here, arguably. Go to www.grandandmiraculous.show. Tonight's code is BEAN. Bean, and let us know what you think. So, we just told you about a man who built worlds for puppets. He hid seams with pipes, and he bought every bonsai tree in a city to make a garden for Miss Piggy. Next time, the puppets are gone. The screens are gone. The technology is gone. And all that is left is a tiny house, a tiny garden, and someone on their knees with a pair of scissors trimming a 1-foot rose bush so Cinderella's village looks right. Storybook land canal boats. There was no 3D. There was no 4D. There was no D at all. Just hands building small, perfect things and hoping someone floats by and believes. Next time on Grand and Miraculous. We close as we always do with words from Brady Bradbury. Gather round the next great campfire. Let us seek and know and understand and dream a new book, a new instruction book to fly great spaceship Earth through the uncharted seas of the future world. Lock into a dream that is your own. Find what truth is in your blood and beat a path from here to there. Your life is yours to own and be. The world is yours to shape and change. The stars are yours as just reward. The campfire tonight is a darkened theater at Hollywood Studios. 580 seats. The lights go down and a frog appears. Jim Henson locked into the dream that was his own. A boy from Mississippi who found what truth was in his blood. Foam rubber and fabric and a half table tennis ball. He beat a path from a college puppetry class to the biggest stage in the world. He didn't carve wooden puppets. He built characters from soft things. Things that could move, things that could feel, things that could reflect all the flexibility of a human hand. And when he spoke, the puppet spoke. The same voice. Bill Prady heard it. I heard it. A very tall man with the kindest face and the voice of a frog. Your life is yours to own and be. The world is yours to shape and change. The stars are yours as just reward. Well, his life was his to own, and he owned it completely. He shaped a world where a place of felt could make you laugh and cry and believe. He changed the way we see puppets, the way that we see television, the way we see each other. And then he was gone. May 16th, 1990, 53 years old. But the puppet showed up without the puppeteer. It showed up on May 16th, 1991, in a theater in Florida on the anniversary of his death. It showed up for 34 years after that. Every joke landing, every gag working, every audience leaving happy. It showed up in a crate in my father's office, a soldier puppet from the finale. It showed up in a VR headset recorded by his son so that someone someday can put on a pair of goggles and sit in that theater again. The puppet keeps showing up. That's what Jim Henson built. Not a show, not an attraction, a way of making things that outlive you. You hide your hand, you disappear, and the character keeps talking. What a cute ending. Good night, everybody.